Ahead for us this half hour, 3 teenagers all shot in the space of a day and a half in the city of Buffalo. We're going to have a former police captain here for some perspective and insight on the concerning violence. Plus a question for the Verify team tonight. Can the test strips that you use for those at-home COVID tests actually get people sick? And changing lives through mentoring. We're going to talk with the local head of Big Brothers Big Sisters about the difference that mentoring can make and how you can get involved. First up for us tonight, we want to spend some time talking about those 3 shootings that have happened this week in the city of Buffalo, all involving teenage victims. In a moment, we'll talk live with a retired Buffalo police captain to get some insight and perspective on these senseless crimes and some concerns about other recent violence involving young people. First, though, 2 on Your Side's Kelly Dudzik joins us live right now. And Kelly, you were able to talk with investigators today to get updates on these cases. What did you learn? Yeah, Michael, police have made 1 arrest so far, 3 shootings, 4 victims. Here's what we know at this hour. The first shooting this week was a homicide. A 17-year-old girl died when someone shot her on Coons Avenue Tuesday afternoon. Police have not released her name, but they did arrest 19-year-old Vincent Manirikiza and charged him with murder and burglary. A 19-year-old man was also shot. He survived. Police told me today that they think he was the targeted victim and not the 17-year-old. There's a second suspect in that shooting. Police know who he is and they're looking for him. Then right after midnight yesterday, a 15-year-old boy was shot on the 200 block of Grider. He went to Oshai Children's Hospital and was listed in stable condition. Police also say they think he was targeted in that shooting. Then the third shooting happened last night on the 100 block of Jefferson. Someone shot a 17-year-old girl in the arm. She was inside. The shooter was outside, and police think she was involved in some sort of argument, and they're trying to figure out if that has anything to do with the shooting.
We are seeing more juveniles, 16, 17-year-olds, and even younger than that, that are possessing guns, that are getting their hands on guns, and they're using guns. It's it's a shame. It's something that the amount of guns that on the street are disturbing. The amount of illegal guns, the amount of ghost guns on the street are disturbing. It's very easy for someone to get their hands on a gun, and kids that age, they get involved in a lot of conflicts, and unfortunately, they don't have the capacity to, learn resolution strategies other than or short of picking up a gun.
Know anything, you're asked to call police. They do have a confidential tip call line. We'll leave that number for you at the bottom of your screen. But one of the problems the deputy commissioner says they're running into is that a lot of the shooting survivors don't want to talk to police even when they have the information, Michael.
It often takes cooperation to be able to solve these. Kelly, are these shootings involving teens part of a trend that we're seeing in terms of seeing, more of this type of violence, or maybe how does last year compare to recent years?
Yeah, so Michael, we talked about this today. The deputy commissioner went over the numbers with me for the past few years involving shootings with people 17 and under. So we're talking about the number of people who were shot, people who were killed, and people who survived who were 17 and under. He says last year was in the middle of the pack. 23 people 17 and under were shot in the city of Buffalo. The lowest that number has been in the past 6 years is 12 in 2018. The highest was 26 in 2016. So this year, with 3 victims this week alone under 17, we'd be on pace to surpass last year's number. But remember, this was not a typical week, Michael.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Kelly Dudzik, thank you for the reporting. We want to bring in right now Jeff Rinaldo, who joins us live. He is a retired captain with the Buffalo Police Department, who is now a partner at Vista Security Group. Really great to see you, sir. We're glad to have you on here to talk about this. We've seen these 3 shootings this week involving teenagers. Obviously, every shooting case is different. Every investigation is different, and each one is important. But you have to imagine there's sort of a sense of urgency when the victim is so young, like these 3 cases. It's violence that nobody wants to see. How do these investigations unfold? And is there any difference when the victim is just so young?
Well, first off, thank you for having me. There is a bit of a difference when you have a young victim, right? So number one, it's a very emotional investigation for the investigators, the detectives, and those involved. Number two, a lot of times, especially in cases where it's a victim of circumstance, correct? It's a young person who happens to get hit by crossfire or something of that nature. They really have no idea why they were injured or how this happened. So it makes those investigations very difficult. But when you do have targeted violence, where you have young people that are involved in a violent lifestyle or other activities that leads to a shooting, it's difficult. Number one, sometimes the family members, the parents, the guardians of these kids don't want them to cooperate because they fear further violence. They fear for the safety of that child or of themselves. Secondly, a lot of times, they're very young people. They don't understand the future consequences this type of activity can have. So being able to garner their respect and their trust to get them to cooperate is a challenge for law enforcement.
Yeah, and to pick up on that challenge, I mean, this is something that we talked to you about countless times when you were with Buffalo Police in terms of how to get people to cooperate. And it's one thing, when we're talking about adults, but, hoping that young people will cooperate as well. What are some of the unique sort of techniques that you can do to try to get that cooperation? Because without it, you might not solve these, right?
Well, I think the most important thing is you have to look at all the things that the city of Buffalo does. So between having school resource officers who truly want to work with kids embedded in the schools, having the peacemakers, having the community police officers visit the schools, engage with the young kids, having the Police Athletic League, a great organization that starts at exposure. I think the younger that children are, that they get exposure to police officers, they start to build that trust and that respect and that confidence, so that when unfortunate things do occur, when there's tragedies, when there's violence, those kids look up to the officers, they feel comfortable talking to them, and they can work collaboratively with the police to help hold those responsible accountable.
While these 3 shooting investigations continue, I also want to ask you about kind of school violence, bigger picture. We heard at the Buffalo School Board meeting last night that it's been a particularly bad week at McKinley High School. How did the police department get involved in these kinds of things? You mentioned the school resource officers, and what else is being done? We've seen this uptick in violence generally, a lot of it related to the pandemic, but to hear this happening so much in schools is troubling.
Sure. So unfortunately, there has been a serious uptick in violence directly in the schools. And when things like that happen, people want to be held accountable, and the schools need a response plan. So whether they're utilizing school resource officers, police officers, or my firm, we do a lot of school security in Western New York, everything from colleges down to grammar schools. The schools want to have a plan in place to address the violence, immediately end it. And then what we're seeing more and more of is violence prevention. So working with the schools, working with the teachers, working with parents, trying to identify issues that are occurring in the school, issues that may be occurring outside the school, and trying to block that violence before it occurs. And the unfortunate part is a lot of this violence is happening on social media. It is spurring from events that happen on social media, and it becomes difficult because the school, the administrators, the parents may not even be aware that their child is in a situation that could become violent.
Yeah, and when we talk about something like, a fight in school, maybe someone doesn't think that that is especially serious, although it certainly can be. The concern, though, is that that can spill out outside of the school, right, and lead to something even more serious. I imagine that's something that you dealt with before, and I imagine that that's a big concern with what we're seeing in schools now.
Absolutely. I mean, schools that have robust security programs, they do a very good job of limiting violence that occurs inside their walls. But in any child's life, in any student's life, school's just a small component, right? It's about a third of their day. So you still have a significant period of time where these things can occur outside the school, either leaving the school, on their way to school, or just about on the weekends while people are out and about. So social media has driven a lot of the violence that we saw in the city of Buffalo. It has driven everything from fistfights to shootings to stabbings to murders. And it's unfortunate because unless somebody is willing to share with a parent, a guardian, that they are involved in some type of dispute on social media or they're being threatened, it becomes very difficult to prevent and block that violence from happening.
Yeah, it is such an important topic. And, it's just the headline here, the fact that we had 3 teenagers, the victim of gun violence in such a short period of time, added on top of all the violence we've been hearing about in schools. We thought it was a really important conversation to have, and we're thankful for you. Jeff Rinaldo is a former captain in the Buffalo Police Department, now a partner at Vista Security Group. Great to see you, and thanks for your time.
Thank you.